Hi everybody, I'm Peter Steinert. I'm going to be showing 8 exercises from a program I designed for a client that is a recreational athlete, has knowledge of exercises, is physically active, and trains 4 to 5 days per week. Some of the client's issues include tight posterior thoracic area, limited range of motion from the ankle, elbow soreness or tightness, and tight hip flexors. The myofascial release of the iliacus and psoas with the trigger point ball and kettlebell. The client should be in the supine position, one leg bent at 90 degrees and the other leg straight out. Lower back should be pressed into the floor using diaphragm breathing and activation of the transverse abdominis. Ball should be placed right above the iliac crest and slightly medial. This is targeting the hip flexors, so it would be ideal for anyone with tight hip flexors. The motion is in the sagittal and transverse planes. For the standard jump rope, the client should start in a neutral standing position with feet a few inches apart, holding the rope in the hands with a firm grip, then using a flick motion from the wrists to bring the rope overhead, then jumping to let the rope go under the feet. This movement should be continued for a desired amount of time. Motion is in the frontal plane, and this is used to increase the mobility from the ankle and wrists. Movement should not come from the shoulders. The target muscles are the plantar flexors. Major muscles are the gastrocnemius and the soleus. This exercise is the neutral grip sandbag floor press. The client starts on the floor in the supine position, feet planted and in line with the knees. Knees should be bent at 90 degrees. The sandbag perpendicular to the spine, and the sandbag comes down to the pectoral line or just below. A regression would be to lower the weight or use a dowel stick to practice the movement pattern. A progression would be to add weight to the bag or use two dumbbells in a sandwich method. The neutral grip is to recruit more muscles for the exercise to put less strain on the elbows. The close grip is more functional than a wide grip. The target muscles are the pec major, lats, and triceps, and the motion is in the sagittal and transverse planes. This next exercise is the band pull apart. The client starts in a neutral standing position with soft knees. The client then grabs the band with hands a little bit narrower than shoulder width. Client then uses shoulder flexion to bring arms out front of the body. Arms should be slightly bent with flexion from the elbow. Wrist should be pronated, and the client uses horizontal adduction to pull the band apart, then abduction back to starting position. A regression would be less resistance of the band. Progression would be more resistance, longer eccentric contraction, or addition of an isometric contraction. The goal is to address posterior thoracic mobility and elbow issues. This exercise enforces proper tracking of the joints. The major muscles are the deltoids and rhomboids, and the motion is in the transverse plane. This next exercise is the sandbag shoulder to shoulder with overhead press. The client starts in an athletic stance with the bag on one shoulder. The bag should be parallel to the spine. Client then grips the bag anteriorly on either side with both hands. Client then presses the bag overhead with elbow extension, shoulder flexion, and upward rotation. Then the client brings the bag down gently to the other shoulder and then repeats the movement. The regression would be seated on a chair, box, or bench. The progression could be performed in the lunge stance or with the addition of more weight. The goal is to strengthen the upper middle back, reinforcement of the hip hinge and athletic stance, glute engagement while pressing. The neutral grip is to address any elbow issues. The target muscles are the triceps, upward rotators, lats, and trapezius. The motion is in the sagittal and frontal planes. This exercise is the sandbag RDL, or Romanian deadlift. Client starts in a neutral standing position with feet about hip width apart and with soft knees. The bag should hang freely anterior to hips, but the client should have a firm grip on the bag. Client then engages the transverse abdominis to protect the spine and put hips in proper alignment. Client then hip hinges forward, letting the bag slide down the shins. with slight flexion from the knees. There should be no lockout. Then client comes back to starting position. This is a regression for a client that cannot perform a more complex movement like the sandbag shouldering exercise or deadlift. Goal is to enforce the hip hinge and triple extension movements. Also, coordination, hip external rotation, and hip flexion. The target muscles are the hip flexors such as the psoas and rectus femoris, abdominals, erector spinae, and gluteal muscles, and the motion is performed in the sagittal plane. This next exercise is the goblet squat with a kettlebell and curl in the bottom position. Client starts by standing with feet about shoulder width apart, holding the kettlebell with both hands on the sides of the handle. Kettlebell should be about chest height, a little bit lower than the sternum. Client then squats down until elbows touch knees. In the bottom position, client uses elbow flexion and extension to curl the kettlebell. After a few reps, client then stands back up to starting position. This is an advanced exercise for someone who has showed efficiency with the squat pattern. A baseline would be without the curl, and a further regression would be squatting to a chair or box or squat with no weight. The goal is to strengthen and enforce the squat pattern and also core engagement. The major muscles are the quads, gluteal muscles, transverse abdominis, gastrocnemius, hip flexors, and biceps, and the motions are in the sagittal plane. This exercise is a single arm band pull down with isometric contraction. The client starts in a neutral standing position with soft knees. Client grips band with hands through either end of the band, like the band is half wrapped around the palm. Client starts with one hand overhead in a shoulder flexed, upward rotated position, and elbow extended for the isometric contraction. Other hand will pull band down into shoulder, downward rotation, retraction, and extension, including elbow flexion. Hand stops about chin height. Gently return hand to top position, then repeat with other side. This is a progressed exercise for someone with experience with a traditional vertical pull movement. The baseline is the traditional vertical lat pull down. Further regression would be seated on a chair, box, or bench. Goal is to strengthen the upper, middle, and lower back. Grip is dependent on any elbow soreness or issues. The target muscles are the lats, trapezius, and biceps, and the motion is in the frontal and sagittal plane.